The element we designed for the checkpoint 2 and checkpoint 3 is the flower pots for the Stardew Valley. Here is a quick overview and comparison about the flower pots we recommended and the garden pots which are already in the game. Also, the upgraded leveled pot system. Our The flower pot we designed allows flower to be grown indoors or outdoors from the same season. It obtained from crafting, requires less materials, and it can be placed any place. The flower or seeds inside the pot will not be destroyed once the pot has been lifted up. Also, our flower pots cannot grow certain Asian seeds or crops. Compared with the original garden pots, our pots is for decoration purposes other than the farming purposes. But we are also planning a leveled pot system, which has a series of pots, different sizes. All of them are obtained from crafting. It also has different level. It can be placed at designated place, depends on the level and the size of the pot. It also can grow different seeds and crops, depends on the level and size of the pots. It also have a function that it will grow faster or slower, depends on the level and size of the pot. Here is a quick overview for our skill chain for our flower pots. The first interaction after user craft the flower pot is go to the inventory menu and move the selector to the craft pots. The screen is going to display some information about the pots selected, which include name instructions and an action icon to remind the player that this item can be placed. Once the player placing the pot, there will be animation and sound effect to let the player know the pot has been placed in place. Once the player press the action button with the pot item selected in the inventory, the pot will appear or will be placed in front of the player or in the nearest empty action area. The animation of the pot being placed on the ground will be played. Also, it has a sound effect to let the user know that the pot has been placed on the ground. The player will have two different choices to grow plants in the pot. The first is grow from seeds. Player press the action button with the seeds selected on their hotbar next to a pot. The animation will show the character putting the seeds in the pot, and the pot from empty to full. Also, seed is going to appear in the pot along with the sound effect that let the user know I can plant seeds in the pot. Also, the user will have options to move plants into the pots. The player pressed the action button with the plant selected in the hotbar next to an empty pot. The character will place the plants in the pot. The other option for the player is move fully grown plants into the pot, which has the same action as the one grow from seeds, but this time as they select a fully grown plants, which are already being pulled out from the ground in their hotbar, and they place that into the pot. The pot will be from empty to full, as well as the plant will be displayed on top of the flower pot. A sound effect is also going to play it. The other thing user can do with the pot is harvest grown flowers from the pot. When the user pressed the action button next to a fully grown plants in the pot, the animation will show the character pick up the flower, and the sound effect is going to play. The flower that the player picked up will display in his inventory or hotbar, and the player will get the idea that he or she can harvest the flower from the pot. We also have some detailed information about the flower pots, but due to the time reason, I'm not going to go through each one, but I'm going to mention a couple of important steps here. First is the recipe for the flower pot. It contains 1 clay and 10 stone. The player is going to receive the recipe of the flower pot from an NPC after they grow their first flower. If the player did not read the mail next day, we will have an opportunity that the NPCs were promoted when the player talked with them.
The evaluation or testing plan for our flower pot mechanic will cover the following items: scope, purpose, schedule and session times, equipment, pre-interview questions, participant samples, research objectives, scenarios, evaluation, and finally the interview questions. For the scope of this plan, we'll be testing the flower pot mechanic, as Christopher has explained, and the goal of this mechanic is to enhance the player's gardening experience and bolster their creative options. We hope to test this mechanic with around 3 to 5 participants from the DAC 305 class using an interview method. This can help gather qualitative data for our mechanic over the course of the week, and It will cover the prototype of the game as of November 25th. The purpose of this plan is to determine if the mechanic could help reduce the tedious nature of gardening and farming in many different games, and as well as provide a player with more options to personalize their farm or area, whatever. In terms of scheduling and session times, the test itself will be performed remotely, and it'll occur over the course of the week of November 25th. There will be around 3 to 5 sessions over the course of the week, depending on how many participants we're able to gather, and each session will be approximately 30 minutes long. For equipment and software, we'll be using Microsoft Teams to connect with the participants, as well as perform the interview. A strong connection is preferable and will be needed to ensure that the interview goes smoothly and to facilitate any screen sharing if required. A microphone is of course a requirement for the interview, and a webcam would be preferable but is not required. Before the interview, there are a few pre-interview questions that we want to ask in order to get a better understanding of each participant. First, we would want to know if they've played any other life simulation role-playing games similar to Stardew Valley in the past. This can help gauge their familiarity with this type of genre video game. We would also want to know how often they play and for how long they play. And finally, we would ask if they have played what games they're currently playing at the moment, if any. This could help determine what other games our participants enjoy playing and if they have any connection to the game prototype that is currently being developed.
Our participant sample may include people who played Stardew Valley or similar games before, people who are familiar with the genre, and of course other students from the DAC course. The two main research objectives of our testing are to figure out the following two questions. Will the users easily find the recipe and craft the pots? And how long did it take for the user to get familiar with this new feature? We'll try to find our answers to those questions in two scenarios. In the first one, participants will be given the task of purchasing the seed and growing flowers on their farm. We'll ask them questions such as, how long did it take for you to find the crafting recipe? And we will observe if the player will notice the recipe in the mailbox, if the players will be able to craft the pot easily. And after the session, we might also ask questions like, was the mail noticeable and easy to find? Did it prompt you to craft the item? And were you able to access the resources? This scenario will help us find the answers for the first research objective. In the second scenario, players will be asked to perform the following task. Find the recipe and craft one pot, plant any kinds of flower, and repeat the process a second time. This will help us understand the time it takes for a user to get familiar with the system. We might ask questions like, how long did it take you to make the first pot, and how long did it take to make the second one? And we will observe the time spent on each step of the task. For example, the time on gathering materials, learning the recipes, etc. After the session, we might also ask the participants if they think this is a reasonable amount of time. Did they spend less time on the second try? The evaluation of our testing will be divided into two categories. Subjective metrics such as familiarity with the genre, overall ease and satisfaction, and the likelihood to use the system in the future. And quantitative metrics such as success rate, error rates, and the time on task. During the interview, we might ask questions like, was it confusing to use this system? The likes and dislikes about the feature, overall usability, and the overall satisfaction level.